Hey, folks, thank you all for joining. Just give us a few minutes and we're going to get started.
Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. Um, Hi Santosh. Hi, I think we've got our speakers trickling in as well. All good, Santosh. Hope you're doing well too.
Yep. I mean, I just finished my space and I was like, okay, I have to jump on next space now,
Yeah.
and I'm here.
Awesome, awesome. That's great. I believe Khushboo's joined in as well, and I see Rizèl here in our speakers too.
Hey, Brandon. Hey, Khushboo. Nice to.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hey, Santosh, Rizèl, Khushboo. Always a pleasure.
Hey y'all.
Hey, hey.
Hey, so I think now that we've got you all here and we've got a good chunk of folks who've joined in. Um, we can probably start with our introductions. That might be a good way to go while we still have a lot of other folks join in because I can still see that our audience is still growing, which is great. And I've been really excited about this space. So let's see how this one goes. Yeah,
Yeah, let's do it.
awesome. All right, I guess we can go ahead. I can start with my introduction and then I'll call upon all of the speakers one by one. I think that should be good. Once again, hi everyone. Hope you're all having a good day or an evening wherever you are across the world. I am Aditya. I am one of the DevRel engineers here at AppRight, and I am really excited to be here with you all. I see we've got our speakers, our absolutely lovely speakers here with us. Um, First off, I think I'd love to have Brandon come up and share a little more about him because I know Brandon's also going to be co-hosting this space with me. So, hi, Brandon.
Hey, Aditya. How are you? Good to be on this space and talking about one of my favorite things. I'm Brandon Roberts. I'm also a DevRel engineer at AppRight, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. And let's see, we got a good crowd here, so I'm looking forward to conversation and perspectives. So yeah.
I think that we're going to have a really good time today. For sure, it's an amazing topic to discuss upon. There's just so much to learn from this space, right? Open source. It's been such an amazing space, such an inclusive space that has allowed so many of us to learn and grow. And
Yep, for sure.
for that matter, I think we've got some amazing advocates of open source here with us today. Um, I think
Sure.
we can
Is
start
that a
with Rizal.
segue for us
Hi.
to? Oh, sorry. I was gonna ask, is that a segue for the speakers to introduce themselves? I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I was just gonna bring you on.
Cool. My bad. I'll go since I interrupted you. I apologize. Thanks for having me here, Aditya and Brandon. Really excited to speak. For people listening in, my name is Rizal. I'm a junior developer advocate at GitHub and fairly new here. Basically started working here 6 months ago, and I also got into open source around the same time. And I'm excited to speak to everyone about how being involved in open source has made me a better developer.
Sounds awesome.
Okay, I'll take this one. Khushboo, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself next?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's such a pleasure, and I absolutely love the topic open source. I am Khushboo. I am a 2021 computer science graduate, currently working as a software engineer at Microsoft. And open source has been life changing. It introduced me to communities, it introduced me to inclusion and diversity, what they mean, and it helped me help a lot of people make their first PRs to open source. So I'm really grateful.
That's amazing. I
Yep.
think third and one of the most amazing people here we have because this is a person who I've personally been following for a long time as well. Hi, Santosh.
Hey, Aditya, hi. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining, and glad to be here. A little bit about myself. My name is Santosh, and I work as a front-end developer here in Hamburg. And I love open source, of course, because it changed my life. To be frank, if you want to read more about it, just go to my tweet, like the tag tweet, and you will learn about my story, how open source actually changed what or made me what I am today. And if you are not aware, Brandon is the the guy who or the person who actually approved my first PR in NGRX as well as Angular, and that's the reason I'm here.
Hey, we're tied together, Santosh, and I appreciate that.
Well, that's actually really, really nice to hear. Things do come back full circle. It's awesome. So, now that we've all gotten through some of our intros, I think one term that's been very visible in the title of this space that we've been all referring to about how great and how nice it is open source. But I believe that, considering that we've got quite the audience here at the moment, we might have a few people who may not be entirely aware of what open source is, or, what exactly we're referring to here. So I think we can probably start by defining in our terms what we mean by open source. Rizal, do you want to start sharing a little about that? Maybe.
Sure. To me, open source is basically a project that the code is available for you to see on GitHub. I'm just trying to think of the most simplest terms, but the code is available for you to see on GitHub, and other people are invited. Anybody across the world is invited to contribute and help make the project better. Um, and another definition I can think of is it's also like a way for you to build community, network with people, and increase your development skill sets.
That's definitely probably a really good way to define what open source is. Khushboo, Santosh, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I can definitely add on to that. I think I plus one to everything Rizal said, and on top of that, I somehow see open source very closely with community, because there are people from all over the world working on these projects, and they help you, get started. They help you with all the concepts, and you can reach out to them. So I see it as a community of people where you get to learn, and despite of where you're working, or even if you are a student, you get an opportunity to work on large scale projects, and definitely you get to improve your networking skills as well as your coding skills.
I think you touched on a really, really important part of open source, especially, and that is about how it allows you to learn more, right? And improve your skills. I'd love to hear Santosh's perspective on how open source has been helping people grow and learn especially.
Yeah, for me, open source is like two things. Of course, it's a way where you can actually get involved with your whatever favorite technology or favorite framework is, right, and grow together. And while doing that, you also improve your skill. But now the game is totally different. Now you're improving your skill, but like you are helping other million developers so they can actually enjoy that framework or enjoy that particular technology.
That's definitely a really interesting point.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And like I said, open source to me, I agree with what everyone else says. Open source to me has been something that has changed a lot of things for me also. And that like the community aspect of it, even like the code, just code being available out there on the internet, on GitHub, wherever you can get to it is has really been important for just having access to that. And just for me, like I used to think that open source was like a really complicated thing or process that you had to think about, because I used to associate open source with things like the Linux kernel, like the whole Linux operating system and open source are kind of the same thing to me at one point in time. but it was much more than, of course, that was just for me, that having that exposure to that, but it being not necessarily being more like an entire ecosystem around, like I said, community and code. But yeah, like I said, that's what kind of open source means to me. Just wanted to throw that in there too.
I really love everything about all of what all of you shared, because there's so many different aspects that I've personally related with through my journey. um, I've learned so much about development in my, well, currently in my career so far, which is not too much, but open source technologies, open source projects, they've been a big part of my journey. um, which really brings me to an interesting a thought here that I've always had about you know how open source makes tech better today. Because I think when we talk about the pros of open source, aside from how it's helping us learn and how it allows us to impact other people, we're also talking about how I at least I feel it has been a rather ethical space in general because of how transparent it can be, and how that's allowed people to build better, more secure solutions, which are effectively benefiting everyone around. Open source is definitely making tech better today, and we've got so many amazing examples of amazing platforms, technologies that we can bring up. I'm personally very proud to be at an organization which has a fully open source product. So I think I'd probably love to touch more upon how it's been making tech better from your experiences. Santosh, would you like to start a little more on that?
Yep. I mean, of course, I will add few points, and I'm sure everyone has uh, more points to add. So the thing is, one thing where I actually really like open source, and which is improving the tech as well, is the collaboration. It teaches you how to collaborate, because this thing, believe me, I mean, I have worked on a lot of organization. I'm lucky to have some amazing managers, or some amazing co-workers together. But when I started contributing to open source, I realized that okay, I was not that good person. I mean, of course, uh, I thought that okay, whatever I'm doing, I'm best, or the way I speak to my team is best. But open source actually gave me that idea. No, I'm not. Actually, taught me how to collaborate, how to speak to people, and this is where I really love open source. And this is something which I have taken and applied in my, like, now real life as well. I have become more, I think, better person than I was before I started contributing to open source. And all thanks to the amazing community who actually keeps teaching me about all these things, right? How to become a better person, how to actually make sure that you are always down to earth, you don't have any egos. And that's what all open source is all about. It's not about my project is best. It's about, okay, we are coming together, and we respect each other, and we are here to learn together.
I think that's a really healthy perspective. Rizal, I believe Rizal has something to add there. Rizal, please go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to add that I really like what Santosh said, and I wanted to like build up upon that. Where like I think open source is having a positive impact on the tech community in general, because um I think we're starting, because like these communities are out in the open, or these working groups are out in the open, we're starting to like analyze them, I guess, in a way, and being like, okay, like why isn't it diverse, or why isn't it inclusive or equitable? And it's kind of pushing us to um, be more inclusive in open source and create communities where people feel comfortable. And I think that's trickling down into like actual corporate technical roles as well. And then on top of that, I think that I personally really like a lot of open source projects that do like social impact, or are working towards fixing a solution in social impact. For example, there's a project called Sharing Excess, which helps distribute excess food from like different areas to those who are hungry or homeless. And I think open source is creating this culture or this vibe in inside of tech where we're focusing more on helping people and coming together to help people. And I think to me, that's like the missing element that tech needs. Of course, like we always can get smarter, we can always build better things and cooler things and like make robots do this, and that. But I think open source is bringing that human element and that culture where we're starting to think of like how is this affecting people, whether they are part of the community and working on the project or whether they are users of the product. That's it.
I'm honestly just enjoying listening so much at this point. I would love for you to continue going on and on, because it's so true. I think open system technologies are really trying to make the world a healthier space, a more inclusive space. I think the project you talked about, which helps distribute excess food, is such an amazing example of that. I've been aware of a few other organizations which have been really trying to impact such problems, right? Like I believe Mocha Global has been trying to bring together more and more experts to talk about and try and use open source tech to assist with environmental problems, to help more accurately estimate greenhouse gas emissions and try to understand how removals and changes in forestry agriculture impact the environment and the places where we live. And I think such projects are so important, right? Because aside from making this information accessible, they're actually making it affordable for us to understand and learn about these problems. Khushboo, do you want to add something there? I'd love to hear from you as well, your thoughts on this point.
Yeah. I just want to double down on everything that Rizèl and Santosh said. And Aditya, you also talked about transparency. So I think that open source enables everyone to contribute to projects regardless of where they're coming from, be it a student or a seasoned developer, or be it any person. Does not matter what degree they have, does not matter what qualifications they have. If they can contribute meaningfully, they are welcomed by the open source community. And I think that is a superpower, because you do not, like, if you are able to add value, then you are very welcome by the community, and that is the culture that the open source community has established. So I think that actually makes us better developers, because we just don't learn how to code better, we also learn how to become a better community and a more inclusive community.
I think the greatest part along with that is that it not just welcomes those who have something to bring to the table, but also those who might not believe that, or who are just starting off with their journeys. Right. I think that's a very special aspect of open source as well, because um, there are so many projects and organizations and programs that are trying to enable newcomers to get their first starts. And I think there's a lot of organizations trying to push more and more focus on that. Whether it's the Linux Foundation with their mentorship programs, whether it's Google Summer of Code or Major League Hacking's fellowship, I think they're all trying to make this a space where anybody, no matter where they're coming from, no matter what their experiences are, um, they're allowing and trying to help them get a start. And that can be so important in someone's personal growth journey. So it's not just making tech a better place, it's also making us a lot better along with the tech. And I think I would also like, I guess on this note, I'd like to maybe discuss a little more about how open source has helped you all learn. And I'd love to hear some anecdotes from your stories, and just more about how you've taken that in your stride and grown forward. So, Rizèl or Brandon.
Yeah, I'll jump in real because I did want to add one more thing here real quick. And we talked about how like open source kind of changes communities. Like we have people from Microsoft on the panel here, and just if we think about like how open source at least like impacted a company like Microsoft that was traditionally thought about in a different way towards open source, and how they kind of changed course over time, and how that kind of trickled down across, like it's still like trickling down across like the entire organization, and even how their impact in open source has changed, and how that has impacted other companies too. Companies that were traditionally had everything, behind, they had, all their source code like behind walls or however you want to call it, but now they're actively putting those things out in open, or even transitioning things like .NET Foundation and those kind of things that were previously closed source, and now those things are open source. So that, like, it's kind of even hard to measure how much impact open source like has had on like companies like that and other ones in that way. So yeah, just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much for that, Brandon. I totally agree with that because, uh, in all honesty, I've been using Microsoft Tech as a developer for a very long time. I'm a .NET dev outside, so yeah, I definitely see that that transition, and it's really nice to see how more and more organizations are taking this step, um, towards maybe open sourcing existing tech, or starting off and supporting more such projects. And it's really been a really nice change, a nice transition to see. I think if you have anything else to add, unless we have that, I guess we can move on and start talking a little about your journeys, about how you grew and learned with open source, if that sounds good.
Yeah, let's do it. But I'm not going first though, and I just want to throw this out here. I can't put up the 100 emoji on the Twitter space, so if you see me overusing the hearts, just kind of roll with it.
All right, sure. That sounds cool. Santosh, do you want to maybe start off on that?
I mean, I would love to hear from Rizal and Khushboo first, and then I'll add.
Okay, awesome.
Okay,
I
I
think,
can
yeah,
go first.
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I remember when I was in college and I didn't even know how to make a pull request. And today, when I can actually, when like today, I have conducted so many sessions on getting started with open source, how to make your first PR, how to make meaningful contributions. I think I've come a long way, and it has been because of the community support. So, I remember that I started contributing to open source because of Hacktoberfest, which is when I got to know that hey, there is something like open source. Because honestly, big projects do seem intimidating to me, and as a student, I did not know where to start. And which is why I think Hacktoberfest was a great opportunity for me as a beginner to understand that hey, this is what the beginner friendly issues look like, and this is what the first timer issues look like. And it actually gave me the confidence to get started. When you actually get hands-on experience, when you actually make that first PR, it is a special moment, and I'm pretty sure that everyone on the panel and on the space, everyone remembers their first PR, because that is from where it all starts. And which is why I just want to say to all the beginners that open source is for you, even if even if it looks intimidating to you, because it did look intimidating to me. But trust me, you can get started, and the community is there to help you.
I love that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Rizal, if you want to go next, I think that'd be absolutely great.
Oh, my bad. I know that you went off mute, so I thought you were gonna say something. Okay, so
Nah,
yeah,
totally
I
great.
I can go next. Yeah. Basically for me, I think it really helped to improve my confidence in myself as a developer. Prior to like early on in my career, I started off in some startups that looking back, they were a little bit toxic because I started to believe I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't code, even though I was like putting out really cool features and working really hard. But my team just wasn't really encouraging me at all. And getting involved in open source helped me to find the community that was encouraging me and also exposed me to other technologies that I wouldn't have been exposed to if I was only like working in the bubble of my company. I got to be exposed to different solutions and different methods that people could take to solve different problems. Um, and yeah, the network as well, it has just been really positive. I've been getting to chat and talk with people that I'm like, oh, cool, I really look up to you as a developer. Like people that can't see dogs, and getting to learn from them on how they create things and solve problems. And in addition to that, like even just thinking about creating I haven't yet, but I'm starting to think about creating my own open source project. I think it's gonna help me to think a little bit more about like how I'm designing projects and putting in a little bit more effort into making sure that like it's the code is easy to follow and it's designed well. But overall, like I don't know how to pronounce your name, but Kush, um, but correct me if I said it wrong. Like how you said, it is for everyone. I really sat there thinking like, oh man, like open source is going to be something very scary. People are going to laugh at my pull request. You have to like be able to like code Linux compiler stuff or Linux kernel stuff. And when I saw it, it was pretty simple. It was just like React and some CSS and Node.js, and I was able to contribute. And I just felt like overall it was empowering and reminded me that like I can code, I am a strong developer, and um, like I said already, exposed me to a lot of different technologies that I might not have gotten a chance to work with.
I think I relate a lot with what you mentioned, especially, and with both of you, especially about how you mentioned how it is for everyone. I know for a fact in my journey, had it not been for open source and hackathons, particularly, I would have actually given up coding. I at one point had pretty much lost faith in my own abilities, and these are two spaces: meeting more people through open source communities, going around hackathons. Those are two things that really picked me up. They let me believe I could build. So I resonate a lot with what both of you have said. I think Santosh, you were going to add something there.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to add my experience. I mean, how open source helped me. So before I start, I mean, let me tell you, it's never late to start contributing to open source. I was 33-year-old when I did my first contribution. So just leave this FOMO behind that you have not contributed to open source and you cannot do it. It's okay. You can just start working in tech and then learn the technology and then get like involved in the open source. That's absolutely fine. Don't have this fear. Otherwise, you will be the one who will be like always scared about it. So don't think about it. So next thing, why I started contributing. So the thing is, I was already using the Angular stack, and I was making money. That was my what you can say motive. That okay, I'm making money now. It's my part. It's my chance to give back to the community because I don't want to take anything for free. And this is something which I have also mentioned in my story. You can read the long story if you have time. But yeah, that was my motivation. But I was not expecting the output without expecting anything. I mean, I've never expected I'll be at this stage sharing the space with Aditya, Khushboo, Brandon, or Rizèl. Even so many of you who's listening to me right now, I never expected this when I started contributing to open source. Right, that's what open source has given me. It has given me so many friends here. I can always reach out to them. I can always ask the help for them from them, and I can and believe me, I have been so lucky. Whenever I reach to anybody for help, no one says no. That's what I have earned from contributing to open source. And I've made families here. Believe me, I would so probably I don't want to cry, but I mean I have friends like Brandon, Lars, Serkan, who's like brother to me, and they have helped me. I mean with so many things. I mean, let it be like better life for me. I'm never expected like I'll be at a stage where I can give life to my family. All this thing just because of open source. So yep, I mean I cannot expect anything after this.
It definitely is a space that gives back so much. Even if we feel we don't deserve it, or even if we feel we're asking too much, it's a space that always gives back so much more. Um, which apps which I think we're fortunate to have a space like this one. I saw Brandon. I think you were gonna go ahead, please.
Yeah, sure. I'll like I said, I talked about how what open source kind of meant to me in the beginning when I before I got started contributing and everything like that. And my one of my first encounter, like actually trying to like once I got past like the fear of I think Rizèl said this also was people are gonna look at your PR, or maybe someone else on the panel said it, that people are going to look at your PR negatively, or they're going to just ignore it, or things like that. So it was a while before I even tried to contribute to an open source project. And like I said, so I had kind of bounced around some here and there. I think I had maybe tried to contribute to one, and it got accepted. But one of my newish pull requests when I started trying to contribute to open source was actually rejected. And just thinking about it, like going back on it now, I can see, why they kind of took that approach to reject that PR. But I guess it kind of taught me a lesson of kind of, at least from this perspective, of going from a contributor to like a maintainer, of how open source kind of work, where you have to make like these trade-offs and things. But what I was trying to do was add a PR to a project that was trying to basically add some more configuration to it. And I think in the long term, it probably would have made the project a little more complex. And that's why the person said that, like I said, I won't mention the project, and the person who closed the pull request was very nice about it. So I don't want to say anything negative there, but I just wanted to know that, or let people know that even if your open source journey kind of starts off where you're trying to contribute, because there's a couple of ways it can go. You can do the good first issue approach, where you're kind of actively going out to find a pull request to open, or maybe you have an idea for a project that you already are looking at contributing to, and then try to contribute that way. So that was, excuse me, kind of my intro to open source contributions. And I mean, it was a good thing that I didn't kind of take that as me not being a good enough developer in that sense, because that definitely wasn't the case. It just means that I just needed to work around, kind of more understand the project and what the project was needed as far as contribution goes. And I think that can go a long way with helping you contribute in open source. So, yeah.
It's such an interesting learning process, right? We don't just learn by building and getting those acceptances, but sometimes those rejections did so much. And I think it's great how the open source space, these projects have, I believe they've made us a little more open to feedback in general, to accepting criticism, to allow us to continue improving in that process. It's definitely really, really nice to see that. I think I have one question in general, probably from a question that I would have had as a beginner. Fortunately, one that I got support for when I was starting off, and one that I know that we've received just as we've been planning for this space as well, which was, we've talked a lot about how we learned by contributing more and building more through this open source journey. And for a lot of people who are just starting off, that can be quite scary, right? So are there ways by which people can contribute, even outside or apart from coding as well? And if so, how? And I think this one is going to really help a lot of people here. So I'd really love to hear from all of you on this point. Rizèl, do you want to start off on that maybe?
Sure, I can. One common way or one common alternative to contribute to an open source project, if you're not too strong in coding or maybe just not strong in that language, is to contribute to the documentation. That's always like a really good option, because I think that will help you to like get a better understanding of how the project's working overall. And in addition to that, you can also talk to the maintainer and ask if you can help with triaging tickets or any project management stuff that the maintainer may need help with. I know maintainers are swamped. They have to like look through pull requests and look through issues and all that and make sure everything is good. So if there's a way that you can help with triaging issues or reviewing pull requests or something like that, definitely reach out to the maintainer and try contributing that way. And I know a lot of projects are looking for UI designers as well. So that's always an option too.
Hi, my name's Simon Willison. I've got a perspective on this. I've been doing open source for actually around about 20 years now. I was one of the co-creators of the Django web framework, and I've been involved in a whole bunch of projects since then. And yeah, this is a very common question, right? How can I contribute to open source? Everyone says you should contribute, but that's not so easily done. One thing I'd like to really emphasize is you don't need to be submitting pull requests from day one. And in fact, dumping a sort of surprise pull request in the project often isn't that helpful because you're just adding more work for the maintainers. So one of the most useful things you can do for projects, especially smaller projects, is try the thing out and then tell the maintainer what you did with it. Just provide tiny bits of feedback saying, hey, I tried this and I built this thing and it's really cool. Or I tried this and it didn't really make sense to me. I got stuck here. Because as an open source maintainer, a challenge is no one ever tells you what they're doing with your stuff, right? It's almost like shouting into the void. You build stuff and people use it, but there's no incentive for them to really tell you what they're doing. So telling people you're using stuff is great. Writing about what you did, just tweet something about one of my projects and I will be happy for the rest of the day, right? Because I'll see that people are out there using my stuff and talking about it. If you've got a blog, write a blog entry. If you make videos, talk about a YouTube video demonstrating a piece of work. That's an enormously valuable sign for an open source maintainer that their project is useful, and it helps start spreading the word about what they're doing. So you don't have to write any code or even submit anything to the project to be a super useful contributor if you're just providing that feedback and letting other people know what you're building with things. And from there, it's an easy step up to helping out with the documentation, helping triage bugs, and eventually submitting pull requests and implementing code. But there's so much you can do before you get to the code stage of things.
Very, very, very on point, Simon. Thanks. I'll just say thank you for all your contributions to open source and everything that you built in that space. So yeah, definitely appreciate that. And it's just like I agree with what you said, and that, like I said, that tailed like directly into what I was talking about of kind of jumping into a project and kind of opening a PR kind of out of the blue, because going from like I said, from a contributor's perspective, you wanted to add value to the project, and then from a maintainer perspective, you kind of have like a vision for where you want the project to go and features that you may want to add, and then but you want people to help contribute to that vision and help with like the workload or issues or things like that. And like you said, you can contribute in many ways other than code just right up front. If you're good at writing issues, that was kind of another way I got involved in with Angular specifically. Was I wasn't necessarily contributing code to the project, but I was helping file issues. I was helping other people who were filing issues on the project and writing documentation and those kind of things. And that kind of stuff gets you noticed. I actually helped once doing that on, contributing that on GitHub. It kind of helped me, or them notice me as part of like a good contributor, and kind of started working on docs from there, and then everything kind of moved on from there. So yeah, definitely.
So I'll tell you what, here's a really interesting thing that you can do to help out. If you look in an issue tracker and people are reporting bugs, if you go into an existing issue and figure out the steps to reproduce the bug, if the issue didn't say here's how to reproduce it, but you figure that out, that's gold, right? Taking an issue that was sort of loosely defined and saying, no, here's a concrete way to get to a point where you've replicated that bug, is an amazingly useful thing to do. If you want to attract the attention of the project maintainers, anything that helps reduce that sort of research workload is super valuable.
Yes, definitely.
Agreeing on those points for sure. I think a lot of what you shared about the different ways, like helping out, explain issues, trying to create a little more content, they've become, for a lot of people at the start, they might not seem as major points of impact, but they can be. I feel even in my own journey, a lot of the impact I've made is by trying to help more people get started, maybe with .NET, for example, A lot of my peers I've seen from who I've learned from. I think even if they're not active contributors, they make a really substantial impact because they allow these projects and these spaces to become so much more accessible, which I feel is really great. So I absolutely love those points. Thank you so much for bringing those up. Um, Santosh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to add here, right? So people generally think that okay, open source is only for developers. I think this is a misconception we have from long time, and it's not only for developers, right? I mean, there is a big space in, let's say, security, right? I mean, there are a lot of security experts who are actually looking at the lot of npm packages and trying to figure out if there is any security issues. They are actually doing open source contribution, right? Because of them, the open source projects are safe. Similarly, I mean, you can also, if you're a tester, you can help write test cases. I mean, of course, now a lot of testers have moved on and they started writing Cypress or Playwright. I mean, they know that those technologies. You can actually go ahead and help a lot of open source projects out there which don't have code coverage. You can actually help them, or let's say if they already have some code coverage, I mean, you can help improve the code coverage more. And of course, as a technical writer, you can, of course, you are valuable, really valuable, and you can help improve the documentation of any good open source project.
Yeah, definitely. I'll throw in real quick that developers are good at writing code, but there's a lots of things that developers can't do. And I'll be one of the first ones to tell you as far as making graphics. And I consider myself to be not working on technical writing, but technical writers, people who make icons, graphics, those kind of things, helping out with your documentation site. Information architecture is a word that are people that I've worked with before that do that sort of thing that I've seen want to get involved in open source. So definitely plenty of ways to, like you said, security. Someone actually reached out to me on our site that was where we were hosting our site and actually gave me some tips about how to not have your subdomain taken over. And they never did this openly, but they actually contributed to the project because they fixed something that they saw that we had out there, and they were able to contribute in that way. So all those things are meaningful contributions.
Absolutely. I've loved so many of the points that have come up here. Um, I definitely hope that for a lot of our audience members here who might be starting off with open source, who might be looking for advice on that front, I really hope these points help um, a lot. I realize that we've been up here for a while and we've had so many lovely folks here with us. At this point, I think I would also like to open this stage up for people to join and maybe share about their journeys or ask any queries they might have. I already see a few requests, so I'd love to start adding folks here. Sounds good?
Yep.
Awesome. So I see a few folks have requested. I hope you can speak now. Nikita, Sanjana, and Shubham. I see you three first. So I think we can take that order. Hi, Nikita. How are you doing?
Hey, hi, Aditya. I'm doing good. How are you?
Absolutely great. Thank you so much for joining in for the space. I've been seeing a lot of your content lately, especially about for people starting their careers in tech. So it's really great to have you here. I'd love to hear your thoughts or any queries you might have.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, first of all, for letting me speak. And hi, everyone. This is Nikita, currently working as a senior tech recruiter in Uber. I think I've been hiring people. Before this, I was in AWS. So, coming in from a background having open source experience as a recruiter, because recruiter will be the first person who will be actually going through your profile, through your resume, and making sure that it's aligned. So, if you have open source experience, if you have GitHub profile, if you have a lot of projects which you have done for someone who is trying to break into tech, like maybe a recent grad or an entry level role, definitely these type of projects stands out a lot. And it shows that instead of just saying that I have done a degree boot camp certificate and I know Java, when you add these kind of projects, it really stands you out and makes you really a strong candidate over the other candidates who are applying for the same role. And it has lot and lot of value. And even I have talked to hiring managers, so they also say that when you find some candidates who have these type of projects, it actually shows that they are trying to learn, and their hands-on skills are really really visible directly in the profile when these projects are visible in the right way. So I would like to like highly recommend someone who's trying to break, like if they are doing their education, or if even if they have done it and they want to really stand out and they want to have more and more calls and obviously get that offer sooner, would really like if they can start their journey or have a little bit more experience on the open source side, because it will really show that these are the areas. Obviously internships and freelancing or part-time jobs you can do, but on top of it, if you have these projects, then it really shows that you have been like a great candidate over maybe 10 more candidates who are applying for the same role. So as a recruiter, would highly recommend going for open sources, and it will help you to become a better developer as per the title as well. Passing the mic back to Aditya.
Thanks a lot for that, Nikita. It's a really great perspective to come about, because I think it's refreshing to hear that it's that open source contributions and work is now seeing the importance it should for people, at least in terms of their careers as well. I'm really really happy to hear that that's a point that's being considered. And yeah, thanks a lot for coming up, and sharing your points and advice.
Last thing I just want to add quickly.
Please.
I'm hiring a lot. I mean, Uber in general is hiring a lot. So if anyone is looking for any job opportunity, please do reach out to me via LinkedIn, or you can directly apply. I have shared my roles as well. So people in US, they can directly apply, and people outside US, if they have any relevant opportunity, they can reach out with their resume. And please make sure that your LinkedIn profile is updated before you reach out to me. Passing the mic back to Aditya.
Thanks. We've got career opportunities here, folks, so be sure to check that out. Sanjana, I know you've requested a while back as well. Thanks a lot for joining in. I'd love to hear from you as well if you want to come up.
Yes, thank you allowing me to speak. Am I audible?
Yeah.
All right. So yes, open source is quite new to me, but I've been trying to have a grasp on it. I think a great deal of open source kind of requires an outreach and research into it, and also a good knowledge about coding. I think in order to basically hack open source, one needs to increase community and peer-based recognition, because the more you increase community, the better you're able to have open conversations and also relations between open sources. And also, when it comes to peer recognition, you are able to kind of have this one-to-one or group-to-group kind of chats around the coding aspect of open source. And I think it comes from experience, which is being gained by contributing user-level software. And so I think another key component is mentors, right? Mentorship is very important. We need to have mentors that can help us achieve our goals. And it's generally very, very interesting to see how well we're doing with that. And also, I think there's some sort of a digital certificate of completion that happens when you have submitted at least 4 PRs. And also you have these small gift card for top 5 contributors as benefits. So I think it's really important to follow the rules, which is training and documentation, also user interface, but also very highly quality assurance in this aspect of outreach and a thorough research, but also coding. So I think I have more questions around coding, since I am very new to open source. I was wondering whether if anyone here can give me a layman's version of what coding is when it comes to open source. But again, really great conversation, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts there. I think I've I sincerely agree about how the increase of involvement in the growth of communities has created such a space for more open conversations. Right? Uh, it really works two ways. It not only helps us access more information, more knowledge, but also allows us to stand for our work and showcase and share. I think that way. I loved that point about how of what you talked about peer recognition. So thanks a lot for that. And also, I think you mentioned you might have some questions around coding in open source. If
Yes,
I
I
wasn't
did.
wrong.
Yes, I did. I just want, because I'm very new to open source, I kind of wanted to understand, how coding kind of works or intermingles with open source.
Would Rizal please? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm. Oh wait, Santosh also raised his hand. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to answer your question properly, but I can try. So, and as you heard like a little bit earlier, Simon and others joined in to say like you don't only have to code to contribute to open source. You can be a designer. You can contribute to the docs. You can help with like creating and fixing issues. But when it comes to coding, it's quite similar to what it would be like working on like a team in your company where you pick up an issue, or you create an issue that you found or like feature that needs to be created. You say like, hey, I'll take that issue and I'm going to work on it. And then you open up a PR with some code. I don't think it's that much different in open source as it is in like on a team. And you contribute code either solving that problem or creating a new feature in that pull request, and then someone reviews your pull request, and either they'll have feedback on how you can improve it or um, how you can add some more to it, or they'll be like, oh, this is good to go, and you can feel free to merge it in. But from my knowledge and my experience, it really hasn't been any coding hasn't been any different in open source than it has been in other environments. But I'll let Santosh go, and yeah, maybe
Yeah.
there's others.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I want to add 2 points here. I mean, so the point which was mentioned, right, having peer recognition and everything, it sounds really good. But believe me, a lot of open source developers are actually doing the open source in their free time. They are not getting paid. And all these things which you mentioned, of course, needs money. So if you want to actually have this, I would say 100%, if those things were there, we will have more people getting involved in the open source. But the first thing is we have to understand that it needs money, so we have to go out and convince the people who are actually using or consuming those projects to give back money to those maintainers, right? Who is giving their own time, their free time. So then this whatever you mentioned will be a reality one day. I'm not sure how many years it will take. I don't think it will be like in next 10 years or 15 years. It is going to take time. And the second question which you had is coding in terms of open source, right? So it starts with, of course, let's say you started learning some technology. You picked up Python. So you picked up Python and then you started doing some projects, and then you figured out, okay, there is one code or one set of code which you have been writing again and again. Then you will think, okay, now this thing is actually something which can be useful for other 1,000 developers or million developers, or not for anyone, just for myself and in my other projects. And then what you do is you figure out a way to push that project or those lines of code on GitHub and then publish it to the world so other developers can see that code and consume it. That's what coding we are referring to in terms of open source, right? So it start with whatever technology you want to start or learn first.
Really great points there. Santosh, you touched upon something so important about the need to give back and support more open source developers, because it is true a lot of open source developers are contributing and building in, um, you know, aside from their daily lives in their free time. I want to put a little plug there because I know at Apprite we've been working on an initiative which will allow us to support more and more open source developers and projects. And we're going to be sharing more about that very, very soon. So just to put it out there, stay tuned for that information, folks, because I think this initiative will allow us to really give back to a lot of developers and projects that have been um, assisting and enabling and helping so many developers and organizations in an absolutely thankless manner. So yeah, we're going to be sharing more about that very soon. So stay tuned for that, folks. And Sanjana, I hope Rizal and Santosh's points helped a lot. If you have any follow-ups on that, please.
Oh yeah, no, I had some brief comments again, like when it comes to, open source software getting hacked, which is sort of common. I mean, you can look at the WordPress model. There's a lot of vulnerabilities that get exposed when they also get fixed quickly. If a WordPress site is kept up to date with software releases, it is secure. However, exploits get distributed very quickly, I would say, so that there is a fairly small time frame in which they act. It's also not always, I would say, the core software. WordPress's plugin arcology has equal problems compounded, let's say, by its openness. But again, if a plugin is maintained, issues can be resolved quite quickly. So I think open source projects have their code based, shared with a greater crowd, and that the closed source projects can't rely on the community that I would say that much to discover exploits. I think there are several reasons for that. I think it really depends on who is behind the code, which is either the clients or management or developers, and how they are aware that they and how aware are they, for the lack of the better words, with security practices and their motivation level to fix security bugs. So being publicly available serves both the security research community, and mostly white hats who usually find and report bugs to the community to get fixed, as well as the black hats who would use the bugs for the profit. And the biggest hack of all time, you can take example of Sony, Heartland Payments, Blue Cross. They can't be pinpointed to open source first. So one last point, if you go to CVE security vulnerability database, security vulnerabilities, exploits, and references and more, if there is a ton of vulnerabilities in both open source and closed source. So being closed source doesn't make it more or less secure than open source. So those were some few points on, is it generally easier or more difficult to hack open source software? And I would love the panel to discuss, the hacking situation of open source, because I think it should really be discovered and talked about.
That's a really interesting point you brought up. And from a security perspective, at least from what I've seen, a big impact of why I feel open source at least benefits on a security perspective is the fact that there are so many more eyes on these projects and this code. So there are a lot of problems that can be corrected before those vulnerabilities are found as well, because of the fact that there are so many people who can critique and catch those problems. And yeah, for sure, there are going to be people who try to leverage the open nature of these solutions for the worse or to try and harm. But at the same time, I feel that there's a lot of other people as well who've been trying to assist. So I feel that open source does have a pro of the fact that there are a lot more eyes. That being said, I do feel that this perspective might differ depending on the scale of the project. I would love to hear from my fellow members and peers here as well.
I think Aditya Ashwin has something to add. He has his hands up, and then of course, I'll talk about this question as
So my views are not related to this topic. So is that fine?
I think in that case, maybe we can take up this question and move to your point after.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That
Please.
sounds good.
I really like this question. So yeah, go ahead, answer this one.
Yep. So to add to this, right? I mean, of course, open source has its own challenges, but I think there are a lot of security experts who are putting their time and they are putting their energy to make sure that open source is secure. I mean, recently, if you remember, Log4j vulnerability happened, and the entire security community came together and they resolved it, right? I mean, came up with a solution and they suggested those solutions. So I would suggest. Uh, Go ahead and check Lirantal, who is one of the GitHub star, and he's been doing amazing stuff in security space, let it be Node.js or any different technologies. And the company he worked for, Snick, who has some open source tools available. You don't have to pay. Remember this. You can actually go ahead and utilize those open source tools and make your code base more secure. So it's not like, of course, there will be different people who will try to exploit those vulnerabilities, but there are a lot of amazing folks around the community who are actually trying to make it more secure, and they are trying to what do you say remove that bad name which has which we keep talking about, right? Attackers or security hackers, they are really like changing that space, and they are bringing positivity to this all the security space. So yep, Lirantal is I mean, I wanted to give him shout out because he has been doing some amazing stuff and talking about security and spreading the knowledge. So yep, go ahead and check his profile.
I had Leren on my mind as well as this question went up. He's been creating a lot of conversations for sure, and Snake has been doing such an amazing amount of work to help make projects a little more secure for all of us. I think those are fantastic shout outs there. Thanks a lot for that, Santosh.
Yeah, and one more thing, I mean, shout out to all the companies who has bug bounty programs, and they are actually paying the developers who are putting their energy to find those vulnerabilities. Otherwise, I'm sure the community which we see today would not be possible, right? I mean, we see people getting paid in millions or in thousands of dollars. So, of course, it's motivating to them as well. So, hope more companies take that step and come with bug bounty programs. So developers actually or security developers can also put their time energy to figure out those vulnerabilities, of course.
Absolutely. I hope that helps, Sanjana.
Oh yeah, that does help. I'll let Shubham go, then I have few points to contribute as well.
Okay, yeah, sure. I see Shubham. Hi, Shubham. I think just before that, very sorry, Ashwin's hand was also up. Since that was
Uh,
pointed out earlier as well. I
Aditya,
think
Aditya, just I wanted to add on that question as well.
okay. Oh, all right.
Um, so uh, just wanted to add like the example of Log4j. If you have bad eyes on the code, there are good eyes as well. So for example, the Log4j vulnerability, the vulnerability was there for like 5 to 6 years out in the open, ready to be exploited. But then someone from the Alibaba Cloud team looked into that code and found out that hey, this is a possibility of doing an RC. So that's the beauty of open source. If you have bad guys out there trying to exploit your code, there are good guys as well trying to find out those exploits before them and patching those up.
Thanks a lot for that input, Shubham. Ashwin, I think I saw your hand raised earlier as well.
Yeah, so I don't have a question, but I do have an experience to share that how open source really like changed, boosted my career, and most of that is the non-coding part that I learned from it. Uh, so one of the several things that I learned from open source, not from the coding part, and I think it definitely deserves a big credit in the open source area, is inclusivity. And that is because open source is so diverse. You meet so many diverse people around the world that inclusivity just follows. Now I'm saying this so comfortably today because I love being inclusive now. Now that because I'm involved almost daily in a lot of open source communities, student run communities, and I like that. But 11 months ago, when I was not in any of these communities, I did not know that concept of inclusivity. And I am from Hyderabad, so there is a whole regional community here. There's a whole culture here, like a local culture. And coming from that, we don't know how inclusivity works because from my college, we never had that diverse exposure before. So we don't know that what are we doing, is that right or wrong. And when I myself got involved in hackathons and these open source communities, when I met diverse people around the world, that's when I realized that, okay, I think what's happening in the local community is not enough. Partly because we never had that exposure and experience. But when I learned that small things like using the pronouns, as small as that, can actually make other people comfortable in that same space, that is really mind blowing. And I thought that, is it because we never had diverse people in our own college, in our own community? Because we never saw a problem like this, or we never saw some discussion around inclusivity. So when I learned about these practices, these best practices, and this concept of inclusivity, I tried to implement that in my own club when I started my own community a couple of months ago, a student-run community. And believe me, I was blown away that I found out there were diverse people in my college. They were just waiting for an inclusive space, safe space to express themselves because we never had one. And that's when I realized how much this open source concept is needed still now in so many colleges and so many places around the world. This is just me sharing my experience to my community. And I can guarantee that I still don't know everything about inclusivity. I still constantly seek help from mentors that how can I teach what I learned from communities, to my friends and the students, the juniors. But it's a start. And it all started when I got involved in open source communities. And inclusivity is just one of the many things that helped me boost my career in tech. Very, very small practices like don't say hello, don't ask to ask, or no hello. I learned this while making PRs. And these concepts go like, don't just, it will just, delay your time in conveying the actual question, the actual problem. Small things like this, I can use it outside the open source environment. I can use it when I'm trying to reach out to someone on LinkedIn, when I'm trying to ask for help. So these are some of the very great practices that I learned from open source. And I think this is definitely a big point that everyone should get involved in open source.
Thank you so much for sharing from your experience. Um, I think a lot of us don't realize the impact it can have at times until we get to hear these stories. Me personally, I know I've had the fortune of having had a chat on this with you, Ashwin. I know we connected about that a little while back, but I do sincerely believe that a culture that our open source communities have been trying to inculcate, it doesn't just allow us to um, perceive but acknowledge these differences uh, and similarities between uh, you know people we're around with, people who we work with, who we live with, and to acknowledge, to accept these. I think it's genuinely such a powerful thing to be able to do that, and it's really amazing to hear how the open source culture and communities have been trying to enable this for so many of us. Thanks a lot for sharing your experience.
Yeah, thanks, Aditya. So with that, I will move back to the audience and let others have the stage.
Thanks a lot for sharing. Um, and yeah, it's been great having you on. I've seen two hands up. I saw Sanjana's first and then Shubham, so I'll go in that order. Sanjana, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I was earlier commenting about the hacking and the security issue. I just kind of want to expand on what are the pros and the cons of open source because I think it should be discussed. So in terms of security, which is in alliance with hacking, you know, the source code present in an open source software is free to edit, and so the problem comes when someone misuses this code for their own benefits. While many of them use it for improving the softwares, others could kind of like invite vulnerabilities such as identity thefts and malicious transfers. And I think also to a very high degree you can say that one of the disadvantages of open source is it being user friendly, in the sense that not all the open source applications are easy to use. The graphical user interface may not be user friendly for the users to understand, and therefore only tech savvy people will be able to understand the interface. Now, when it comes to compatibility, some applications cannot support, I would say, both. Open source software and proprietary software. If proprietary hardware needs to run on an open source machine, it kind of requires the third party drivers. However, I would say that it cannot generate that the hardware will work on the host machine. Therefore, it is kind of easy to say that before purchasing a hardware, it is recommended to check if it is supported by the open source application. Then comes maintenance, right? Even though an open source software does not contain any upfront costs, still it is equipped with some hidden costs, especially with maintenance. If you face any problems in the implementation process, a third party support may be needed, which could change additionally. So this is a problem for businesses that is unaware of the hidden costs. Then comes the drivers. So finding required drivers for hardware components is not an easy task, and and the reason is that the respective driver must be supporting the current operating system one uses. So by default of that, a new hardware component that is installed could fail to provide its functionalities, and the sixth con being support. So when using an open source software, it is kind of common to experience technical issues. So unlike any proprietary software, I would say that an open source software does not offer extensive support. For fixing this, people look usually for support services online, and since an open source software, apologies, is created by numerous developers, I think there is not just one person liable for an error. The only option available is to contact the provider or rely on the third party support services. Now, that's all I have to answer. I kind of also want to touch on the pros, but I'll let Shubham speak first and then answer the pros. But thank you.
Thanks a lot for sharing your points. Shubham, do you want to add to that?
No, I just wanted to share my experience of how open source has helped me become a good programmer somewhat. So
I think maybe Shubham, if it's all right, shall we take that up after this question?
Yeah,
And
it's
then this
okay.
point of the question, maybe? All
Yeah.
right. Thank you. Thanks a lot for that. I think we had some really interesting points come up, and I'd maybe like to share my perspective on some of these. Um, in my experience, with open source software, the source code is free to contribute to, but not necessarily free to edit. Um, and a big reason why it may not always be free to edit, just free to contribute, is because of some of the problems you talked about people who might potentially add certain vulnerabilities, about possible malicious entities. And I think in a lot of open source projects that I've seen, that is a big part of why there are often multiple maintainers, review processes, people keeping that eye out, and potentially, yeah, the fact that anyone can literally see these changes come into place, and if these problems are observed, the fact that they can be reverted uh, due to public discussion is also a big aspect of open source. And I think an example of this might be, um, I guess, if there's anyone here who's been involved in the .NET space, there was a lot of debate a while back about hot reload. I think from the CLI. I hope I'm not incorrect, but that was a point which came into a lot of public discussion, which was actually reverted. Like I think the removal of that tool was actually reverted after more and more discussion by the community, because that happened on a public level, because this platform was open source. And that is a factor, right? The fact that these changes happen in the open is a big part of why these discussions and these changes can also be taken place and problems can be reverted. At the same time, it is true that not a lot of open source solutions might have the same level of support as proprietary platforms, but it is also because they don't have even close to the same level of investment in them, because a lot of these projects are maintained by people aside from their day-to-day lives and jobs, uh, without enough thanks or without enough supporters. So a reason why first party support may not be available is also because this is not someone's primary job, or this might just be because they don't genuinely have time outside of their uh, personal lives. And maybe a certain amount of investment into resources to support these contributors could impact that, could allow them to involve more people, or focus more on generating. But I think a lot of that does come down to the sort of investment we've seen on open source solutions, as Santosh talked about earlier as well. um, I think I saw two more hands as we started this discussion, Khushboo and Santosh. I'd love to go in that order to hear from you as well. Khushboo, do you want to go ahead?
Oh, I have nothing to add there. I just wanted to say I see Eddie in the space and I know he's a
Oh,
huge, advocate of open source. I would love for you to bring him up on the panel. I would love to hear him speak.
awesome. I've just sent him over an invite. Santosh.
Yeah, I mean, so regarding the same discussion, right? Uh, so recently, this similar thing happened. If you know curl, curl is like,
Yeah,
uh,
I,
which is
I think I know
which is
the
like,
example you're going to talk about.
yeah, which is available like default with all the laptops or uh, laptops you buy. So one of the billion-dollar company actually got an issue from some customer, and they just said, asked him to actually provide the solution, but he's not responsible, right? I mean, he's not getting paid. It's okay. I mean, that particular customer can come to his platform on GitHub and raise this issue and explain what is wrong, and probably he'll be able to he'll be ready to support. But a billion-dollar company giving zero money to that particular maintainer and asking him to support that was really bad part. So I think uh, whatever your expectation is, it's really good. The only thing is, let's start asking those companies, the billion-dollar companies, to pay those maintainers, and then we'll be more than happy to support whatever need they have.
I think, conversations around support have been really interesting, especially in regards with open source projects. I'm exactly aware of the curl example that you talked about, because I remember a tweet by the creator of curl. I'm absolutely forgetting his name at the moment. Uh, but yeah, that was definitely a big example of yeah, Daniel, if I'm not wrong. I think Daniel had shared about that. I believe he's also got a really good. I think there was a really interesting interview that he had with GitHub for the README project. If I'm not wrong, that's definitely worth a look as well. Um, yeah, but it's I think definitely when it comes to support, especially it's one thing when I talk about individual uh, hobbyists or developers asking. It's another matter when you have a business or an organization expectation, and definitely investment on those fronts would go a long way, because it's not just an expense, right? It's an investment in the support of these projects, in the support of these initiatives, which are trying to impact a lot of people and actively do so on a daily basis. I think, if we think about a project at the scale of curl, for example, uh, let's think about the number of people who are actually, and platforms that are actually leveraging this on a daily basis. And let's think about the fact that it's an open source project, which may actually not get active investment or support. It really does give a lot to think about. Yeah, that's
Yeah, it
definitely there.
definitely does. And I just wanted to throw in that, like like you mentioned before, people are doing contributing to open source, maintaining projects on the in their free time, and like building out things like say curl and these things that are people are depending on every day. Like we could only imagine how much more the other maintainers and open source projects could do with if they were like funded enough to work on that or work on other things like that as part of like their job, as opposed to having to take that extra time out of their lives, even though they may enjoy it. I mean, I've always wanted to get, or I'm hoping we can get to a place in the industry where more maintainers and uh, uh, contributors can do this as part of their work, and they can still, have their free time to do other things or do more open source, so that kind of thing. So, and keep that cycle of contributing and giving back going. So yeah.
Yeah, and just to add, so as we always say, charity starts at home. So in case, I'm sure there are like more than 500 people listening to us right now. So if you are using some projects, you are working for some enterprise, of course you are making money. So I think $5 a month will not cost you anything to support a project. And I think if you think that project is useful for you, I think go ahead and support that in that way. I mean, of course, money is also important, as we said.
I hope that maybe provided some context on those points, Sanjana.
Oh yes, it did. If you will allow me to speak, I'll just add some advantages of open source software real quick.
Sure, I think we can hear those. After that, I just want to put out, keeping in the interest of time as well, we've got a couple of other speakers on, so I'd love to bring them up as well, but I think we can take a few points here.
All right, thank you so much. So, when it comes to advantages of open source software, I think one thing to keep in mind is flexibility. Unlike in any proprietary software, users in open source software does not experience vendor lock-ins, even if they are irrelevant features. I think the users are effectively removing them, and this is because the source code is free to modify. So users do not need to stick to the provider's requirements here. And it is also very cost effective in the sense that generally an source software is free to use. So therefore the users does not require to pay for the usage. It can be installed free of cost without any upfront expenses. Nevertheless, the quality is always not compromised, especially for businesses with, let's say, light budget. Using open source software can therefore lead to the significant amount of cost savings. Then there's also reliability, right? High high reliability can be ensured when using an open source software. So the open source software here is created by expert developers and guided by them. So there is very less chance that someone will identify flaws in the software. In addition to that, the software is monitored by a set of experts who is able to fix faults in a lesser time duration. Now, there's also scalability. So, similar to a Linux operating system, an open source software can also be scaled easily according to the needs. An open source software can be scaled up and down so that the businesses could achieve their desired results. Also, it's error free. The number of people involved in maintaining an open source software is more in hundreds and thousands, like there are many. So usually they are present as a community, so these people can make sure that the software is error free of bugs. So once a user identifies a bug, they could report it to the community so that the community could fix it as soon as possible, which means releasing a patch will no longer take time since the source code is available to everyone. So these are some of the points I had to share. The source code is just to kind of again emphasize on what a source code is. The source code in open source software is available to all users, and according to the needs, they have the option to edit, to share the source code, and also to modify the source code. And this ability comes from the license which it is equipped with. The license here grants permission for the users to alter the software. And although open source, I would say open source software kind of helps businesses in many way, they aren't flawless. Similar to other technologies of open source softwares, everything has the pros and the cons. So those were some pros and ideas around open source that I had to offer. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for bringing those up. It's been really great to hear about from your perspective and thoughts. I think it's good to discuss both pros and cons, because this is something that I believe comes up. None of these spaces are absolutely perfect, right? But it's definitely to hear more and get that context. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people here. I see a couple of hands raised, but just before that, I know Shubham has been waiting for a very long time to share. I would love to bring Shubham up, and after that, I think I'll take points from the folks who've got their hands up. So Shubham, can you please go ahead? Yeah,
Can you hear me?
yeah, you're audible.
Yeah. I'll just quickly add 2 points how open source have helped me. It has helped me through collaboration and communication way. So most of my student life, when I was doing projects and everything, it was more individual centric, and so I was lacking that collaboration factor. But when I started contributing to some of the open source project out there, I kind of got into how the world is coding out there, what the standard is, and then making those changes into my per- personality of coding, and then collaborating with other people out there, and communicating what my ideas are. So I just wanted to add that quickly. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that, Shubham. Great points there for sure. Eddie, so nice to have you up here with us. I know your hand's been up as well, so I just love to hear from you as well.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the invite and the awesome space that you have here. And it's just middle of the night for me, so I've just joined. I missed all the fun. But to be honest, Santosh had their hand up before me, so I'm happy to wait my turn.
Eddie, I can pay to hear you, so go ahead first, please.
Santosh, you're too kind. Thank you so much. You already do, actually. You actually sponsor me on GitHub, so thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I missed a lot of the conversation, and it's great to hear the conversation in the last 5 minutes. It's been amazing, and I'm sure I've missed lots of great stuff. Just one thing I wanted to add to what I want to pronounce the name wrong, so apologies, but San, did I pronounce that right? Loads of great points there. And one thing I wanted to add to that was that also it's round the clock, in that if someone does log a bug, like you said, if someone does mention that something's wrong, it's not that 9 to 5 in a specific time zone, or a bigger company might have 2 or 3 time zones. It is round the clock. There are people all around the world working for these projects. Like you said, many thousands of people. So I think that is awesome. It's not perfect, as Aditya said. It isn't perfect. That a lot of these people do it on the side. I had the founder of the Curl project on my YouTube channel. I got his name quite recently, so I'm disappointed I can't remember his name now. So sorry, everyone. But yeah, it was interesting to see how the Curl project is used in cars. It's used in kitchen machines. It went to Mars. Like, it's used in so many places. I think over 1 billion devices, and unfortunately, most of those don't actually donate. So yeah, it is hard. It's not perfect, but it is getting better. It definitely is getting better, and I think the pros outweigh the cons. I think it is definitely important, as the person before me, I've lost their name now, mentioned. It's a great way to collaborate and communicate and practice all our skills on real world projects. So that's definitely a big number one. And then to consume the open source projects as well, it's great because it's transparent. These projects do move fast, and they all have a particular goal in mind to make a good project and make it better. Whereas proprietary, sometimes it might seem all shiny and have a fancy website with animations and all that good stuff, but you don't know what is going on behind the scenes. And just because we don't know, it doesn't mean that it is more secure and so forth. I did do a video on this. There was an interesting survey by VMware Tanzu, an open source project, and by VMware, and I did have some statistics on this, and it was interesting to see, because I know most of us here might not work for that, certain big enterprise companies, but they did do a survey, and it's quite interesting how open source definitely came out on top. That is on my YouTube channel, if anyone wants to have a look. I can't remember any statistics off the top of my head either, but I hope that helps. I'm here for a short while, for as long as I can, to support. Any questions, anything I can help with, I'd love to help and support. You're all awesome, and it's great to see so many amazing people in the audience. Everyone do go check them out as well and drop them a follow. Thank you so much again.
Thanks a lot, Eddie. So yeah,
Thank
Aditya.
you.
So yeah, so to add to this, right? I mean, I just have one point to add on what Sanjana mentioned. So I think using the term open source and free has done lot damage than good for the open source community. So I think as all we love open source here, I think one thing I will ask you, or I'll expect from you, is stop using this word that open source is free. Someone is paying for that, saying, so someone is paying from their his own time, or there are a lot of open source advocates who are actually paying, supporting some other open source developers. So it's not free. Let's stop using this term. I mean, I know this term has been from years, and it has become like a default that whenever someone mention open source, oh, it's free. Let's stop doing that. Let's say, okay, it's not free. Someone has been doing a lot of amazing works. Someone is putting their own time, and a lot of community members are paying for it. So let's what you can say, let's make this our motto, that in upcoming years we will try to reduce this word of using open source and free together. Yeah, that's it
Thanks
from
for
me.
Santosh. Thank you. I see we have a few hands up there as well. Khushboo, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just have one small point. I just want to correct Sanjana at one place when she mentions that open source is free to edit. So, what developers who want to contribute to open source projects do is that they raise a pull request, and then the maintainers of the project have the right to merge it or not. And just because I think there is also some misinformation around licenses on open source project. So, I would love if Santosh, Eddie, or Brandon, or anyone could add information on what a license means and also clarify this point.
licenses can be such an interesting space because I remember for one of the projects I was active on a while back that my friends and I had been building. We actually tried to explore the different licenses um, that that would that we wanted to look at to understand how much well I don't have an exact but how free we wanted to allow access to certain aspects of this project. I remember coming across a very interesting fact. Just for example, this is more of a piece of trivia, but I felt I just wanted to put this out. So when a project doesn't have a license, it doesn't mean it gives everyone the freedom to do whatever they want. It actually means no one gets the freedom to do anything at all with the project. I kind of just want to put this piece of trivia out there because I know I've had so many conversations with people who may have been unaware of this fact about licenses around open source projects. I just kind of felt I wanted to add that since you brought that up. Um, yeah, does anyone want to add to that? Maybe Shivai, Eddie.
Sure, I was going to wait for Chevet or I want to say the name wrong again. Sorry, Sanjay to talk. But yeah, no, about the licensing. If they haven't jumped in, please do. You're absolutely right. So many people think that, and it defaults to the GitHub T's and C's, which it makes it quite restrictive. So it's always good to have a license, and before you contribute to a project, do check the license and see. A great website that GitHub made was choosealicense.com. And it lists out the popular license, gives examples of projects that use those licenses. So you can see Rails uses this and X project uses this. And then there's also a page, if you say you're not sure, there's a button down the bottom, not sure, then it lists all the licenses, all the popular licenses, let's say, and what you can do and what you can't do, like in checkboxes. And it's quite interesting to see which ones are more relaxed. You're not responsible, people can do what they want with it, to the more restrictive ones. Well, I say more restrictive, but there's ones which are really good where I think I'm getting this term correctly. Again, I did a video on this, so I should know this, but it was a few months ago. Where it's more copy left, where they can do what they want with the project, but they have to stick with the same license. So they have to keep it open source, for example. Unfortunately, it's very hard to enforce this. A lot of people don't abide by the license, and it's hard to know if they've taken it for a private project and used it and so forth. So it's not perfect, but it's definitely better to put a license, put one that you're happy with, and then that way that you know that you're trying to do your best, let's say. And if people unfortunately abuse it, like with the fork, right? People can fork a project, so they can take a copy of the project into their account, so they can either use it or make changes to it. And you still get some people who clone the project, delete the history, and upload it to their account, and it's just removed all the history, all the commits, and are trying to pawn off the code as their own. But it's not. So yes, it's not perfect, but it's definitely, as Aditya mentioned, it's definitely better to have a license that you're happy with. So do check out choosealicense.com.
Thanks a lot for those points, Eddie. Sanjana, do you have any follow-ups on that? Or Shivai? Shivai, if you want to add, that'd be really cool.
Licensing is a conversational killer, I think.
We can shift to something else if you have in mind, because I know that in itself is a topic that can go on for an hour or more. So yeah, another conversation for another time maybe. But for now, if you I think we've had Shiva. I'm not sure if he's able to speak. But if any of
he's probably on an Android device, and like some of the other people on the call. Also, we know how Android works with Twitter Spaces.
I've had a few close calls today as well. Just happy that things have been all right so far for me. Yeah.
Hey Aditya, I will drop off. I have to make my dinner. So see you guys
No worries.
next time. Sorry, see you all next time. And thanks for inviting me.
Thanks,
Thank you
Santosh.
so much for joining in. It was absolutely lovely having you on and just having your perspectives.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Bye. Eddie, yeah, please.
On my screen, by the way, Sanjay has their hand up. I don't know if they want to go first, but I don't know if
I,
it's a bug.
I did see. I think I tried calling Sanjana out. I'm not sure if she's able to speak, but if you want to go for it.
I would like Eddie to go ahead and then I'll speak.
Okay, thanks, Sanjay. I was going to ask a new question, so I'm happy to wait. I was going to kind of chat to people in the audience just to see how many of them, if they could give a reaction, maybe like I don't know, to say kind of yes, and I guess maybe I don't know the wave to say no. How many people actually contribute to open source, and if they don't, then what's their challenge? I'd love to hear what their challenge is, and maybe we can answer some of their challenges or blockers to help them contribute more. So that was mine. So I don't know if you want to do that now or if you want to go first, Sanjay. I don't mind.
Oh no, that can be answered and then I'll go next.
Okay, thanks. So hopefully everyone is still awake. You have no excuses. It is 3 a.m. for me. So hopefully you're all still awake and here. But yeah, if you can give a reaction. So a 100 if you contribute to open source, specifically don't say code, and maybe a wave if you don't. And if you don't, then maybe you could come up on stage and mention what some of your challenges are. Also, if you do, I'd be interested to know also why you do it, and do you have any challenges as well, because you could still have some challenges. I know some people have challenges where they only, I say only, but they contribute say documentation, which is great, which is amazing. It's so often forgotten, so thank you all so much to do that. But maybe some people do want to get more into the coding side or something like that. But interested to know what challenges people have, and maybe we can answer some questions. We do have some people in the audience who also might be able to help as well. I see Tessa, Sam. We had Carl here a moment ago, but I think they've now gone again, probably time zones. But some other people who might be able to help too.
I absolutely love this question. I'm very sorry what's going to come next, but I think we've also been up on the space for a very long time now. It's been over 1 hour 40 minutes already. I think we can hear a few perspectives. I see a few hands raised, but I would request folks to keep some of these points a little more crisp, since we're also far beyond our planned time. That being said, though, it's a great question. So I think, with the folks we have up, I'd love to hear from you. And I think post that, we can also maybe move to closing points if that's all right. So, Shivai, Hamantika, Sanjana, um, if you want to go ahead and share, that would be absolutely great.
I have a question to what just Erish asked. So I wasn't able to find the 100 sign emoji. That's why I requested for the mic. So what happens is for first time contributors who, or let's say for somebody like me, who I would say that not very skilled when it comes to a particular technology, but would love to contribute to a code base, so it becomes quite tricky to understand what is leading to what. And then because most of the times these projects, they have a huge code base, and it becomes difficult to traverse through all of them and then get an overview of things happening and then finally contribute. So what do you suggest when it comes to a situation like this?
I love this question. Can I go ahead, Aditya?
Yeah, please, please.
So thank you so much for coming up on stage and asking that question. A lot of projects do have a quite big code base. Well, I say code base, large a repo, let's say, because it involves so many other things, tests and documentations and so on. And you're right, it is hard to get started. And I think some people want to kind of contribute to the bigger, fast-paced projects because they can say, "Hey, I contributed to React," and so on. And it is hard to get started. And if you ask people for help, they're all quite busy. The project is moving very fast. And so if changes are made, they can quite quickly get conflicts, and it is quite scary. So what I recommend, two things here for people who are interested in getting into, say, a larger project, is one, maybe pick a slightly smaller project to get used to the workflow and automation and understand how it goes. But if people are ready or really, really want to do the bigger projects, what I would recommend is they contribute to projects that are bigger, that they already know, that they might use it as a dependency in their project. So they're kind of familiar with roughly how the project is used and work. And then what I recommend is actually contributing to the documentation or the test coverage. Make small contributions, and they're still valuable. They're not any less valuable than a bigger contribution. But the reason why I say that is, if someone reaches out to one of the maintainers or one of the other contributors who are regular, they might not give that person the time because it might just be a passing visit. And that's happened to me before. You kind of jump on a call with that person, you help them, they don't even finish the pull request, and they were doing it to get a job, and then they disappear, you never see them again. Whereas if someone's contributing often to that project and adding value, so contributing, I also mean adding value to the project. Maybe saying an issue is a duplicate, they could reply to the issue and say it's a duplicate, and then put a link to the other issue. Yes, they can't close it, but they can still link to it and say it's a duplicate, for example. If that person can keep adding value to a project in any shape or form and not creating noise, we have had some people in the EddieHub community trying to just get green squares, and they're creating a lot more extra work for people by making noise. So definitely don't recommend that. But if they can add value to a project for weeks, if not maybe even months, and just keep adding value, when they do say, hey, I want to actually work on something bigger, can someone maybe help me do this? The maintainers are going to want to help because they know that you're around for the long haul. It's not just a flying visit. And so I would definitely invest in one or two projects rather than trying to jump around between multiple projects. I do see people say, hey, I contributed to Kubernetes, React, and list off all the biggest projects on GitHub. I don't think there's value for them or the projects. Whereas if they can stick to less projects, but look for the long term with those projects, they're going to get more help, and they're going to be able to provide more help. Sorry, I'm mumbling. It's middle of the night for me. But I hope that makes sense. That's a really good question, and I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, please do let me know.
It does. It definitely does. Thank you so much for adding such valuable points. We'll definitely keep them in mind, and I'm sure it will also help a lot of other people who are here. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for that. Once again, very sorry about this, but in the interest of time, I'll take Sanjana's point as well, since that's the only hand I see raised. So yeah, I think after that we can also move towards closing this session. Sanjana, do you want to go ahead?
Oh yes. Just on open source, I've pinned a tweet here just for people to kind of understand what I'm trying to talk about. I hope it's okay. So yeah, contributing to open source can be, of course, a rewarding way to learn, teach, and build an experience in just about any skill you can imagine. And thank God for this space that I'm able to learn so much about open source. As I said, I come from an artificial intelligence background, and it's always very fruitful to me to try to grasp as much as possible about open source. I think just some key points, on improvising software one relies on. There's lots of open source contributors who start by being users of software they contribute to. But when you find a bug in an open source software you use, you may want to look at the source to see if you can patch it yourself. If that's the case, then contributing that patch back is the best way to ensure that your friends and yourself, when you update to the next release, will be able to benefit from it. And another key aspect would be meet people who are interested in similar things. Open source projects with warm, welcoming communities, as I was talking about with this space, keep people coming back for years. Many people form what I would say, lifelong friendships through their participation in open source, whether it's running into each other at conferences or late night online chats about burritos. Also, talking about building public artifacts that help you grow a reputation and a career. By definition, all of your open source work is public, which means you get free examples to take anywhere as a demonstration of what you can do. Then you can learn from people's skill. Open source offers opportunities to practice leadership and management skills, such as resolving conflicts, organizing teams of people, and prioritizing work. And the last point being, it's empowering to be able to make changes, even the smaller ones. You don't have to become a lifelong contributor to enjoy participating in open source. Have you ever seen a typo on a website and wish someone would fix it? On an open source project, you can just do that. Open source helps people feel open source helps people feel agency over their lives and how they experience the world, and that in itself it's gratifying. So those were a few of my concepts, ideas. Thank you, Appright and Aditya, for allowing me to speak. Brilliant room, and I learned a lot today about open source. And I also thank Eddie and Khushboo, who corrected me on the feasibility and the other thing that I've completely lost at this point, my chain of thought. But thank you so much. I just learned a lot, and I hope you guys have a good night, day, evening, afternoon, wherever you are. Take care.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot for sharing your perspectives and hanging around. I think it's led to a lot of interesting conversations today, and I'm glad some of these points came up for sure. Um, I see Shivai's hand raised. Where I mentioned we're gonna close off after this point, but maybe just one last, Shivai, if you want to go ahead and share. Right, I'm not sure if that's going on, but either way, I think we've had
Hi,
a really,
can I ask a question? Sorry, just quickly. So sorry.
already. I think we can take one last question, but yeah,
Okay,
sure.
so I'll just be open here. So for me, right, I feel whenever I think of contributing to some open source projects, I feel like they're really smart guys working on this project. What can I really add to this project to to add value to it? So for me, it's what form of value am I going to add to a project like Laravel that's already at I think version 10, and I'm still stuck on 5.8. So it's for me that's where I feel sometimes. So I don't know if there's any advice on how to find find a better way to approach contributing to open source.
I already see two hands raised on that. Eddie and Brandon. Um, yeah, let's hear from you. I think you're both amazing people to talk on this point.
Brandon, go first. I'll be talking a lot.
Okay, I'll jump in really quick. I think that I think you should ask the question in a different, or have like a different mindset about how you can add value. We kind of talked about many ways that you can contribute to a project, even the size of Laravel, and those are like, it's an ongoing thing. Value is like always continually being added. So think about the things that how can you add value? You can add value through docs. You can add value through opening an issue. I mean, no software is perfect, so you can add value by filing a bug, or it may not even be contributing directly to the project. You may be like an evangelist for the project. You can help other people, teach other people how to use it and how they can onboard and get better with using that particular software. So there are plenty of ways I would say you can add value, contributing to the project directly and using the project as a springboard for others.
Thank
I
you.
love that. Victor, I'm just going to add one more. I was going to say that you've also got your perspective on how you use the project, what project, also what you we use the project with, what dependencies. Maybe there are slight, I don't know, config issues or limitations that you can do. You mentioned an older version and there's a newer version. The upgrade path, when you upgrade to it, are there any challenges that you have? You could maybe improve the documentation on that, maybe improve the code coverage. Your perspective can add so much value. The chances are that people haven't got the exact same perspective as you, that are contributing. But then on the flip side, I bet you are lots of people who have similar situation as you, and they could benefit from your experience. You could be 1 or 2 or 10 steps ahead of them in, say, upgrading, and there's no point everyone struggling on the same upgrade challenges. You could share that. So look at the upgrade documentation, look at even the quick start documentation for people to get started with the project. Definitely your perspective can add lots of value. So I wouldn't let that hold you back. And you could take your perspective and add it to a different framework as well, because if you're new to the other framework, you're coming with a different perspective, and that again can add so much value. So I would definitely get started, and whatever you do, it would add value. So don't deprive the community of all the value that you can add. Please definitely get involved in the conversation. I guarantee you'll learn a lot. You'll meet loads of amazing people, and you can add value to the projects and the community. One last thing. All my success, if that's what you want to call it, GitHub Star, Digital Nomad, etc., is all because of open source. Literally nothing else. No amazing LinkedIn profile, which I don't have, by the way, because I removed all my information. But none of all that stuff has helped me. It has been open source and being able to learn faster, learn with different people, and network of different people, and just so many amazing things from open source. So that's my biggest recommendation for everybody. So thank you again to Aditya and Oberai for hosting the open source space.
Thank you so much for both of the points. Victor, I hope both of those perspectives helped out with your question.
Yes, thank you so much, Eddie. Thank you so much, Brandon. I really appreciate that. That's really giving me a new perspective on contributing to open source. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I think with that, us being at our 2 hour point brings us at a really good time to close off the space. Um, Huge thank you to all of our speakers, those who are here right now, and those who stayed along with us for a very long time today and had to leave a little earlier. It was absolutely lovely to hear about all of these experiences, perspectives, um, tips, and journeys. I really hope we're able to maintain such conversations going forward, because uh, while this is a space that has had so many positives for us, it is one that continuously evolves on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I definitely hope we continue having such conversations and helping each other um, share our perspectives, and yeah, just continue learning and growing with each other. Thank you so much once again, and hope you all have a good day or a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.